Principal Matters Podcast, episode 486.
Welcome back, Principal Matters Podcast listeners. I am Dr. Jen Schwanke here with my co-host, Will Parker. And today we have a great interview for you with Elizabeth Dampf, and you're going to love her. She's a practicing administrator in Chicago, the Chicago area, and has a wonderful book we're going to talk about. But as you know, before we get started on that, we have Will and I just do a little bit of a quick conversation, and love today's question, Will. Love it, love it, love it. So why don't you throw it out there?
Yeah, so here's the question, Jen. What self-reflection practices work for you? Because people all have their own things they do, but I'm just curious, what works for you? And I've got some samples I want to share, but I want to hear some of your thoughts first.
Well, oh goodness, what is it? Maybe overthinking, obsessing, worrying, staying up in the middle of the night. Those things just seem to work wonderfully well.
You're so real.
It's so true.
I'm going to throw in, I'll throw in when we go for jogs, when we walk the dog, when we're, all those things.
I just love to beat a good self-reflection to death. That's just so fun for me. No, but in all seriousness, what I find works for me with self-reflection is to give myself time to be thinking clearly. I am not someone who can necessarily think clearly if it's a situation full of emotion or defensiveness or self-doubt, that kind of things, which, by the way, is exactly what today's episode is about. It's about self-doubt and leading through it. But what are you going to throw out there, Will?
Well, I've got so many, it's almost ridiculous, because I think I've become so into self-reflection that I probably overthink things I know I do. I mean, Jen, this year when I was reflecting on the calendar year, I did so much reflection. It probably could have been my next book, right. just trying to think through all this stuff. So, right. But I wanted to keep it really simple in this conversation, because one of the self-reflection practices that I do with leaders is just a quick, 4 statements, and then tell me how you're doing. Just 4 statements. So if you don't mind, I wanted just to read those out loud, because for principals, the 4 statements that I like to just say is, all right, on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being little time, 5 being lots. Statement 1, I have been visible with every student, every teacher, every day. Now give me some thoughts. How are you doing staying present with the people you're serving? Statement 2, I have been meditating on listening to or reading helpful books or lessons. So just stop. What's your commitment to learning? And usually if they're in a conversation with me, that means they've already committed to learning. 3, I have been making healthy choices in my sleep, nutrition, exercise. Stop. Okay. Am I taking care of me? Because I'm going to burn out if I don't. And 4, I have been faithful to my loved ones with my time and attention. Because, now I have to remember I have a life outside of school. And so Jen, I just thought, when I was thinking about that question, I was just thinking that's one practical way that I self-reflect, in addition to all those other things that I do, like you, which is walk it out, think it out.
Well, and let me, before we turn it over to Elizabeth, let me just tell you a quick thing that happened yesterday. I had a colleague pulled me aside and said, I just want to let you know you really made this other person mad. He's kind of been bad mouthing you. It's kind of not good. And here's what he said. And I came home that night and I said to my husband, I'm so upset. I had thought about it since that time. Overthink. I'm so upset. Here's what I intended. Here's what happened. Blah, 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 blah. And he looks at me like I have grown another, another head or something. And he goes, why are you thinking about this? And he said, no, it's over. It's done. You didn't do anything wrong. Move on. And it was a really helpful reality check.
Good for him.
Move on.
That. Yep.
And I went in the kitchen and I chopped up some chicken and we had a great dinner and I stopped. And so definitely put that person in your life who's going to stop your unhelpful cycle where you are spiraling about nothing. Should I have thought differently about if I'm making this person mad? Well, maybe, but maybe he was just mad and venting to someone and it came back to me as not unlike gossip. So there we were. Stop the cycle of overthinking.
Well, you and I both have such great partners who kind of can give us that reality check that we need
Yep.
to get out of our heads and back into the moment.
Yeah.
Well, Principal Mentors listeners, as we wrap up the Q&A part, we will, in the show notes for today's show, we're going to obviously introduce you to our wonderful guest, but I'm going to ask Emily to include a link to that self-reflection example that I gave you. And in that same link, you'll see the same reflection questions that have been reworded a little bit for district leaders, but also reworded for teachers. Because I had a principal ask me, how can I do this for my teachers? So we wrote one that would be reflective for a teacher. So Jen, thank you for the opportunity to explore together, and thank you for the guests that you're going to be interviewing today. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Why is IXL used in 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts? Because it works. Research across 45 states shows that IXL schools outperform other schools on state tests. With IXL, you get a personalized online learning and teaching solution that helps you improve achievement, empower teachers, track progress, and more. This one platform for K-12 helps teachers accomplish what normally would require dozens of other tools. For example, as students practice skills, IXL automatically adapts to ensure each learner is always supported and challenged at the right level. IXL also provides every student with a personalized learning plan to help them close knowledge gaps effectively. One of my favorite things about IXL is their personalized test prep tool. For exams like the SAT and ACT, IXL will analyze a student's most recent score and generate a custom list of skills to help them boost their scores. If you want to take the load off your teachers so they can do their best work, IXL can help. Learn more at IXL.com/PM.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Welcome, Principal Matters podcast listeners. I have a guest with us today, Elizabeth Dampf. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, Principal Matters podcast listeners, this is Jen Schwanke, and I am here with Elizabeth because of a conversation that actually Will and I were having when we were recording an episode not too long ago about happiness and education leaders and teachers. And we were actually talking about an article that Elizabeth wrote for ASCD. It was a blog post, actually, and it was called The Cost of Happiness for Education Leaders. And you guys, it's such a brilliant article. Please, please go on the ASCD website and read this blog post. And as we were talking, Will and I were like, we have to talk to Elizabeth. And I said, I got it. I'm on it. Elizabeth, I'm coming for you. And so I did. I reached out to Elizabeth this afternoon. And here we are. So to our listeners, Elizabeth is a practicing administrator in the Chicagoland area, where she has served at both building and district levels. She wrote several print articles in educational leadership, and regularly contributes to the ASCD blog. She has also spoken on several podcasts, including Leading into Leadership and Principal Linear Notes. So we are thrilled to have you, Elizabeth. Tell our listeners a little bit more about you.
Well, let's see. I taught high school English for a few years, and then I started my administrative career when I was actually still in my 20s, which is something that I would and wouldn't recommend, maybe just depending on your tolerance for learning as you go. But I think that has given me a unique perspective, because I really did come from that position of being a 20-something single teacher hanging out with friends all the time to be in a very tough spot as an administrator when I was still young. I'm in a great spot. I mean, point of my career right now, so I still have the whole wide world of education administration in front of me, and I love that too.
That's great. Our lives are very parallel. I started teaching English, and then I went into administration at 28 or 29, I think. And you're right, learning on the job. And I had a wonderful mentor who's like, here's what you need to take care of. And I took care of it, but boy, I was tired.
Yes, so true.
So there are many critical points in the writing you do. Again, Will and I found this article, The Cost of Happiness, but then I dug into other pieces that you have written. And you come, Elizabeth, from such a place of wisdom and experience. I read every word. Sometimes you skim. I read every word and I had to stop and really think. And so such a testament to yourself, not as a writer, not only as a writer, but as a thinker. And so I want to kind of dig in to that brain of yours. In one piece, you explore that the deep-seated animosity that can exist between teachers and administrators. And this is something I have always really resented, wanted to fix, worried about, all of that, this us versus them mentality. So help us, Elizabeth, to kind of explore this systemic issue that we have in education.
Yeah, sure. I mean, systemic is the right word for it because I think that when we see this animosity between us versus them, teachers versus administrators, it's not that people are individually corrupt or that they don't have students' best interests at heart. It's not that you turn into a different species when you become an administrator, and it's not that teachers don't see the big picture or anything like that. Those are excuses, but they're not reality. I just think that our job contexts are often so different, and the system does put different types of pressure on each group. And that is what foments that us versus them mentality. So, for example, if you look at what teachers face, right? Teachers are facing increasingly high workloads. They are being made to spend more time proving they're doing their job. They are dragged across a bed of coals in the press sometimes, where people are blaming teachers unions and blaming the jaded tenure teacher, that bogeyman out there, for all these things. And it's just more and more and more pressure on teachers, and then compounding that, there's the pressure of the actual job. So students coming in with ever increasing behavioral issues and needs, parents putting more and more demands about curriculum, and it's so much. And administrators aren't in the same situation to see that. Just by the virtue of their job context, they are not in that same situation. So it's very difficult for them to empathize. And then from the administrative perspective, right? Administrators end up having very little job security, if any at all, right? Tenure isn't a thing for administrators. Loyalty bonuses, any incentive to stick around in a particular district, that's just not a thing. And then that causes administrators to continually look around and sniff the air. Maybe there's something better at that district that I would like. And if they're going to pay me more, if there's going to be a better culture there, if I will feel appreciated there and be empowered to do really good work there, I'll go there. And so maybe then they leave, but then that just causes teachers to say, well, why should I listen to this principal? They're going to be gone in 5 years anyway, which is, an unfortunate fact, right? Most teachers outlast most principals in a typical school. So naturally, they're mistrustful. Naturally, they think there's a revolving door. Of course, they're suspicious of all of these change initiatives that are ushered in every time a new administrator takes the office. So yeah, it's a systemic thing that I think is a vicious cycle. It really does make itself worse and keep compounding itself.
Right. And I think back to when I got my principal's license, and most of the classes were students in the room complaining about their principals. And the irony, of course, is they were in the room because they wanted to be principals, and there was very little grace given. And then I've been in many meetings with principals where there's very little grace given to teachers. And again, it's very ironic to me that we want the grace, but we won't give the grace. And I think that feeds that perpetual cycle.
I agree. And I would even add that although it is true that all administrators have been teachers at some point or an educational professional at some point, I think we are very hesitant to admit that the further we are from the classroom in terms of years and in terms of our position, the more we do forget what it was like to be a teacher. I mean, there's almost a taboo on saying, well, I've been out of the classroom for 12 years and I've been in central office for 10. It sounds wrong to say that because you're supposed to pretend that no, I continually
Right.
remember every aspect of teaching, and it's ridiculous. And I think from a teacher's perspective, maybe the taboo is empathizing with your administrators, right? If you cut someone some slack when they make a mistake, you're seen as siding with the enemy
Right.
somehow because you're supposed to hold the line, and
Right.
both of those are just totally unproductive.
Right. Right. And I think there is a through line, and that is you kind of described it in the beginning. You said, these are my words, not yours, but we're all working from a place of fear these days. And so, I'm worried that someone's coming after me for this or someone's coming after me with that. So there is that commonality. But I agree with you. And I had a mentor say to me once that you should say, I don't remember what it's like to be a teacher. Tell me. It's been 10 years. It's been 15 years. It's been two, whatever. Please tell me, help me remember. And that at least opens up the door.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the kind of conversation we should be having across the board, right? So I am not a parent. Tell me what it's like to be a parent. I
Exactly.
am not a social worker. Tell me what that's like.
Exactly. You also write, Elizabeth, about the culture shock and that loneliness that new administrators feel when they cross over to what some call the dark side. I remember, some of my teacher friends teasing me about the lobotomy I had gotten when I signed my administrative contract. So for new principals and assistant principals who are listening to this podcast, they're driving to work, they're feeling that isolation. What do you think is the first and maybe most critical step in the beginning that, to earn back the trust that seems to evaporate the moment you take that title?
Well, I think the first step is a mental one, and accept that it isn't you. It isn't you. You didn't turn into another person as soon as you became an administrator, and there's nothing that you did wrong that caused the trust to evaporate. But then after that, I would say think about whether you're in the same building or not. So if you were a teacher and then now you're the assistant principal of that same school, you're working with people that you already know, which is amazing, but also challenging. The amazing part is you already have relationships with them and you can pull from most of the same well with the people that you already know. So if you used to talk to this person about the game or about their kids, continue to do those things, right? You maybe can't be going to happy hour every Friday, but that doesn't mean you can't still be their friend. So bank upon the things that you used to do and the relationships that you have built and keep those alive. And just because you have a new office and maybe some new blazers or does not mean that you have to turn into a different human being. And then if you're in a totally new school, then I think showing that you care about people first is the obvious best step, right? I think the newbie mistake, and definitely one that I made, is coming in and trying to exert authority and to project the fact that there's a new sheriff in town and I have high expectations, but that's a great way to burn trust
Right.
instead of to build it. But you think, and as a person who became an administrator at 28, I made that mistake. I thought no one's going to take me seriously. I'm obviously not, as old as everybody else. And, and no one will take me seriously if I don't act really strict. But that was a rookie mistake that I just learned the hard way not to do.
Right, right. And I do think now you opened the door or threw me the softball or whatever. It is, I think, very difficult for young women in particular, to be a 28-year-old woman, to walking in and saying, boy, I got to be in charge. And I don't necessarily have that traditional look that might people might expect from their principal. So that does add another layer of pressure, I think, for female leaders.
Well, it absolutely does. And something that I noticed because I was an administrator in an entirely different school district from where I was a teacher and actually a different part of the state. I acted like the administrators in my old district, which was extremely conservative, extremely traditional. Female leaders had a much harder time and had to work very, very hard to exert authority in that district. And I carried it into a much more liberal, much more female populated district where it was totally out of context. So women in that district where I was my administrator, first administrator role, don't need to do that. We account for like 2/3 of the leadership staff. So it just looked weird, but like I didn't know that. Why would I know that? All of the female leaders I knew were very like blazers and briefcases and rigid all the time.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to tell a story I've told before, for my friend Janelle. She's the superintendent of Fairbanks local school district. She was driving to work this morning and heard me tell the story, but it's worth it. I was leaning up against the wall at a basketball game once and had a parent come, a very, large, aggressive father, and he gave me the what for about something. And my male colleague standing next to me looked at me afterwards and he said, no one has ever spoken to me like that, ever. And so that's just a story worth telling because ladies, it is different, and the culture of your school and your district, if that kind of stuff is okay, then you need to know it. So kind of know where you're working would be my takeaway there. Um,
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love all the things you talk about with trust. That's an issue that is near and dear to my heart. I've written a whole book about it. You've done a ton of writing about it and thinking about trust. Um, I love at one point you very astutely pointed out that the educational system itself often fuels mistrust. You mentioned high administrator turnover. You mentioned this, obsession with change leadership that makes teachers feel naturally skeptical. So let's talk for a moment to the building leader who doesn't necessarily control those district level hiring or retention policies. How can they build a stable, trusting culture within their own walls if or when or while the revolving door continues to spin around them?
Well, one thing to be aware of, I think, in a principal or an assistant principal role is how many previous building leaders your school has had. So it's extremely common, more often than not, for teachers to outlast principals, and therefore they think, well, I, I'll weather this person. If I don't like them, then I'll just weather their time out, and whatever they're telling me that I have to do, I'll just, do whatever the minimum acceptable standard is, and it doesn't matter. And what that means is, as a principal, you need to understand that mentality and, frankly, kind of validate it, because it is valid. If you've been a teacher in a school for 20 years and had 8 principals, that would do something to your mentality. So, and rightly so. So I think thinking through, all right, well, this is where this school is coming from. This is their relationship with the leaders that they've had before I got here. And I'm not saying that in order to build trust, a principal has to stay there forever. So that's not what that means. You can build trust even if you're only there for 5, 10, 50, however many years. You can still have a trusting relationship with your staff, but you have to see where they're coming from. I think the other thing to think through is whether you yourself, as a principal, must be a change leader. Now, this was a vogue for a long time during No Child Left Behind, and I think even a while into the teens after NCLB was dismantled, for a lot of reasons, right? You always want to improve test scores, and you're looking for the hotness that is going to help you do that and drive improvement and be innovative and work with tech and work with AI and do e-learning during COVID, and then keep the there's always going to be change. But if you yourself come in riding on a wave of change plans that you have made, specifically if you've made them in isolation, that in and of itself will engender mistrust from teachers, because they're going to think that you're coming in to fix them and that it's all about you and your reputation as a turnaround principal. And that will make them suspicious, and it will burn you out really fast, because you will come in, try and enact change, fail, and then leave. And then you're going to be part of the problem for those teachers, because you'll be just another person who came and went with their grand plans.
Right.
So I think thinking that through now, you might be in a situation where you have to drive improvement somehow, but that's where you use, I think, a more sophisticated change management plan, and you build something together with teachers, and you use small but powerful metrics, and you think about where the school has been, and you work with the staff and figure out, well, what have we tried? How did we try it? How effective was it? How do we know? What's a logical next step? And you work together with the staff to do those change things. So I realize that turned into a conversation about change leadership, but I do think that that revolving door is so linked to change management that you can't ignore it.
Right. Well, I think you said a lot of really profound things there. I think back to the word systemic. I know an urban district not far from us where their jam is they move principals every year or two.
Yeah.
It's what they do. And I just think, that it's impossible to start the trust work with, tell me about your kids. Tell me where you worked before. Tell me about the student you have. Like, you can't do that because you're there for, a minute. And so I think that, for any listeners who are maybe not in the principal seat, but in a higher leadership seat, those are conversations that we need to have about systemic, blows to trust, for lack of a better word. And you've also written, Elizabeth, this speaks deeply to my soul, about people pleasing. My dad used to call me a collie when I was little. He's like, you're like a collie running around. Like, how can I please you people,
Mhm.
Leaders work for people pleasers especially can be a frustrating game of whack-a-mole. Solving one group's problem angers another group's, which upsets another group. Tell us a story, Elizabeth, from your career where an attempt to make people happy backfired, and maybe what you learned from that experience about the futility of trying to please everyone, or just see where the story goes.
Yeah, sure. So it is a secondhand story, but I worked in the district where this happened, and it's a friend of mine. And it makes me sad actually just to tell it, because this person was a principal, and they came in brand new from outside of the district, and they were going to give the teachers things that they had been asking for a long time, which is a noble goal in many respects. And so they did their absolute best. They worked with union leadership, they worked with the teacher committees, they worked with all of the, teacher leaders in the school, and they just checked off one by one all of the things that people really, that they were under their skin. So they revamped the cell phone and discipline policy. They gave a new teachers lounge. The old one was gross. They like totally gutted it, like brand new, like incredible. There's Keurigs everywhere. They,
The Keurig
yeah,
method.
well, hey, coffee matters. So,
Right.
they did everything, in order to just like make the school look good, feel good, show teachers they were listening. 2 years later, they got destroyed on the school climate survey. They were personally attacked. Quite a variety of language was used to describe them and their culture building ability. They, notably had some of the lowest culture scores district wide. Like, and it was awful to see. I mean,
Oh,
I just felt,
oh my
yeah,
goodness.
I said it made me feel sad. As I was looking at this, and I personally, as I was talking to them, I was like, how did this even happen? Like, you did so much, like you gave them everything. And the principal said, you know what? I didn't really ask them what would make them feel better. What their, if you'll, let me coin the phrase or use the phrase here, if what their love language was. And
Right.
Elizabeth, am a person who appreciates acts of service. And so if someone gave me a new teacher's lounge and someone did, overhaul the discipline policy based on my feedback, I would consider that proof that they cared. But then, this principal very astutely said, but I think that what our teachers want is more affirmations that they are valued, like verbal affirmations, words of affirmation to them saying, I care about you specifically, Mrs. Teacher, and I believe that you specifically are doing a good job, and I'm going to take the time to talk to you individually and not act like, oh, but we gave you Keurigs, aren't you happy now? And
Right.
that was that principal's reflection, which I give them so much credit, because I feel like I personally would have been demoralized after all of that, but just watching it was demoralizing. But
Right.
that's a perfect instance of, if the principal is correct, then maybe they should have taken time to ask what would make you feel valued to the staff.
Yeah, I think that's so, I've read the book, The Five Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. I think that is a very critical mindset shift. I also know, and I'm sure you've worked with principals before, they think, okay, I've got to make morale better. Okay, I'm gonna buy pizzas on Friday. I'm gonna get bagels on, do all these things, and they're working so hard, spending so much of their own money, and no one says thank you, and everyone's still upset. They just, maybe have a belly full or whatever. So you're right. When we solve the wrong problem, we haven't solved a problem at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. And I think it can turn into a vicious cycle for the administrator too, because then they're, oh, can I solve this problem? Can I put out that fire? What can I do? What can I do to serve you more? And then you stop being the leader that anyone needs.
Right. And to the point of variability, it's not that Keurigs wasn't the right thing. Maybe it just wasn't the right thing for that staff at that time, because maybe it wasn't the biggest priority. And so for anybody out there who just bought a Keurig, it's still okay, but
Yes.
it might not fill the hole that the water's running through yet. So,
Mhm.
and to that point, um, one of the most challenging ideas that you propose, and I think this is very courageous, but also of great relief to many principals, is that idea that leaders should stop, or maybe should never start, accepting responsibility for other people's feelings and happiness. And Elizabeth, you are singing my song here. We are a profession that's built on care and service. There's a lot of talk about service leadership, servant leadership, which, the use of that word is very interesting. This can feel counterintuitive. So how can leaders practically shift their focus from managing emotions to building what you call, and I'm quoting you here, an environment of professional norm, high expectations, and consistent results, especially when faced with a genuinely unhappy staff? So I know that was a lot, but break that down for me.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot to break down because that is a complicated topic. So just to say a couple of things here. I do absolutely stand behind the idea that you can't make anyone feel anything. If you could, life would be a lot easier for you. But then you'd have to consider, what will other people be making you feel? If someone wants to make you feel inferior or make you feel intimidated, you don't get a say in that. So it works both ways. You can't make anyone feel a way, and they can't make you feel anything in particular. So that's something that I operate on. But I also agree with Brene Brown, one of my favorite authors on leadership, when she says, and I think I have the quote close here, you can either spend a reasonable amount of time attending to fears and feelings or an unreasonable amount of time managing behaviors. And attending to is not the same as making. So I can attend to how you're doing, Jen. I can attend to your feelings. I can listen. I can empathize. I can show you that I do care about your feelings. And if you're not doing okay, I care about that. I'm not going to say, sorry, hun, just go off and do, but I can't make it better for you. And even if I am the most empathetic, incredible, compassionate leader in the world, I can't necessarily make you feel better. And so I think it's fine. It's important to understand that fine nuance between making and attending to. Attending to good, making to impossible. I also think, though, that when you are trying to attend to without it taking your entire job over, what you're trying to suggest is both, I care about you specifically, but I also care about us collectively as a school. The same way as if you were talking to your spouse, I do care about you, my spouse, and I care about us, how we function as a couple. So it's not a situation where you can just tell me whatever you want and I will blithely do it, and you get to call all the shots and your feelings dominate everything. We're in a relationship. And I think in a school, you're in a relationship. All of the people in that school are in a relationship where we all have to be okay and we all have to do well. And so I think that's where that nuance is, right? Because you, especially if you have a genuinely unhappy staff, you're not rolling with it. You're not, just dismissing that. You're attending to it, but you're also saying, look, we have to be okay, and our students deserve everyone's attention. Our deserve everyone's compassion. Our students deserve security. So we have to do that too, because our students are part of this community. So we're all going to hold ourselves to high standards because we all have to be okay. And while I care about you, I also care about us.
Right, right. There's so many lessons that can be taken from that. And I'm someone that I kind of I'm repelled by the idea of telling a school we are a family, because I think families are, community is a word I like much better, because families are they have their own distinct purpose. A school community, though, operates a lot like a family in the sense that it is the collective. It is, you can have your feelings and your issues and your problems, and we're going to kind of surround you and help you work through those, but not to the detriment of any other person in this community. And I think that's something that can help principals get out of that savior mode. I'm not here to save anybody, but I'm here to attend to. I just love that language, Elizabeth. I think that's really critical for people who are listening here.
Well,
Tell
I
me,
can't take credit for the term attend to, but
well, I can give you briefly, whatever. We're not copywriting this entire conversation. I'm just kidding. Okay, so
yeah.
here is another question. You talk about the book Crucial Accountability. And that book advises asking, okay, why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do that? This requires a great deal of empathy, which can be in short supply when you're exhausted, when you're under attack, when you're worn down. So what practical habits or mental frameworks can leaders develop to maintain this perspective on their most challenging days?
Sure. I think the question that I like to ask myself is, have I ever done that? And there are times when the answer is unfortunately yes. Oh, this person acted unprofessionally. They had an outburst. They didn't do their part of the work. I have done all of those things.
Right.
And so if I can do it, they can do it. And I'm not saying it's okay. You have to be able to tell yourself like self do better next time. Okay, don't do these things. But it makes you really truly empathize with the other person because you've stood in their shoes.
Right.
And then I think there are times when the answer might be no. So you're seeing someone acting in a way that you have never acted before, and you hope and believe that you would never act like that. In those scenarios, that is where you have to just ask, is there any good reason for that? What do you know about what's going on in their life, or what pressures they're facing, or any potential reason, maybe something you don't know about, but maybe you can at least imagine that would motivate that kind of behavior. Even if the behavior itself is wrong, people innately don't want to do a bad job. Most people show up and they want to be good people and do good work. So if they're falling short of that, which they do, there's a reason for it. And once
Right.
you know the reason, you can start thinking about caring for that person.
Right. I when I was younger, I used to be so much harder on people. And then, as life has happened, I've gotten a lot more understanding about bad days. And I find myself saying more and more the older I get, well, that doesn't really sound like that person, normal behavior. That doesn't seem right. I'm going to check in on them rather than just be mad, be mad that things aren't the way I want them to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to that point, you speak a lot about the power of language. What are a couple of subtle language shifts that you may have made or that leaders can make in their daily conversations, in their emails, in their meetings that can disarm tension and bridge this divide that we have in education?
Well, I think what we need in education is better listeners. And
Mhm.
so I
Yes.
think that anything that you can do, and it's not a word you use more, and it's not like an email, whatever, but it's a way that you can show you're listening. So active listening habits like and asking clarifying questions and asking probing questions, asking better questions across the board. Let's just say that. Summarizing, asking better questions, and then I think demonstrating empathy at every possible turn, not just in your nonverbals. I think we tend to be pretty good at nodding and smiling, but I also think explicitly stating, I understand what you're going through. I've been there before, and I know that it feels like this. And I think when you can truly empathize with someone else and you can show through the way that you have a conversation with them that to you, they're not just a worker bot, but they are a real person with real experiences and real feelings. I think that is one key thing to help bridge the divide, because if we all leaders who did that for us, I think most people would be a lot happier in their job.
Right, right. Yeah, I think language is so powerful, and as we've said, we want everyone to be happy all the time. Probably not gonna happen, but as leaders, it is a huge immense responsibility. I think that one of the things that has worked for me is saying things like, I really do hear you. I really do. And giving that moment for that to sink in, not I hear you, but
Yeah.
you're wrong. Um, I understand, except I really don't. That can be, you can't. One of my biggest language shifts, Elizabeth, was replacing but with and. So I don't say, I hear you, but I think we need to do this differently. If I just say, I hear you, and I think there's a different way we can approach this, it just feels different to replace
Yeah.
and with but.
Yeah. I didn't even think of that. That's a great suggestion.
I always say, if somebody says, I really like your dress, but your hair, I didn't hear about the dress. All I heard was
Yeah.
my hair needs fixed now.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a final question for you, Elizabeth. You have noted, and I have seen, we're all seeing that teachers and administrators are leaving the profession, or more scary to me is they're not even joining it. Our young people are looking around and saying, I don't want that job. So, in that sense, the stakes for improving school culture and education culture have never been higher. So I'm giving you a magic wand, Elizabeth. You have it in your hand. What is one fundamental aspect of the American education system that you would change to foster a true sense of shared purpose between teachers and admin?
Yeah. This is part of the education system, but it is also a countrywide change that my magic wand will affect. I I truly, sincerely believe and wish that we could make teaching the most revered, coveted, respected job in the country. If you think about it now, that makes a massive difference to what kids want to be when they grow up and the way that we treat professionals. So, the terms doctors and lawyers, those are bywords for successful people. Teachers are rarely talked about that way, except maybe by those in the industry or who have family members in the industry. But I think that if teachers, firstly, were respected financially by being paid on the same level with doctors and lawyers and our highest possible working professionals, that goes hand in hand with, oh, you're a teacher, you must be so smart, oh, your kid is going to teacher school, wow, you must be so proud, oh, they got a job, what grade, that's incredible, that is such a, and it needs to be talked about, I think, with commensurate levels of respect and also paid with I think a sense that we invest in this profession because we believe that it is both powerful but then also challenging. And so I think that if our cultural respect for teachers just skyrocketed, teachers would feel respected and they would feel valued, which I think we can see pretty clearly that they don't. I think that would be a sense of not necessarily needing to, I guess, parse out every aspect of the teaching profession, right? I'm not saying that we would have a perfect system, but I think that when people feel valued and respected, they tend to act accordingly. And when they feel disrespected, that's when you're not getting their best work.
Right. And there are this is a distinctly American thing. There are countries where teachers do have that level of reverence. They really do.
Yeah.
Quick side story. I dated a guy once, Elizabeth, and he said to me, I had just started teaching, and he said to me, well, if you can't do, teach. And he thought it was hilarious, and I broke up with him.
Yeah, it's
I
it's
was
like
like,
that. I mean, I remember hearing that adage, right? Those who can do, those who can't teach, and that is just such a shameful way of treating this profession that I think is so much harder than most people realize who haven't done it.
right.
And then for those who have done it and know how hard it is, but then leave, because they think, why do I put up with this? I'm not making enough money to put up with this. The benefits are not worth this.
That's right. Well, and I can feel the speech bubble above the heads of some of our listeners that might say, teachers aren't really helping themselves, when they go to social media and they lament how difficult the job is. And I do understand that, but is it the dog or the tail here? What gets someone to that point of anger and frustration and toxicity? Is it the system? Yes, it is. And so it's impossible really to point to the antecedent on that, but that's why we need a magic wand.
Yeah, and it's challenging because I think the teachers who are taking to social media to talk about the ills of the profession, I suppose they're not helping themselves or the profession in that I personally have a family member who has watched those. Like this is their favorite, I don't know, 7 p.m. hobby is to scroll through YouTube videos of teachers talking about whatever happened at school that day. And then he'll ask me, is this true? Did this really happen? Is this really a thing? And I'll be like, well, yeah. And he had been considering being a teacher. And then he was like, maybe not.
Right.
So there's that. But then at the other end of the spectrum, I also think there should be a sense of, well, you should hear what the job is like, right? One of the biggest issues that we experience with early career educators is that they get into the classroom and it is nothing like they expected because student teaching isn't enough. Clinicals aren't enough. We spend way too long talking about educational theory and don't get people actually teaching in like a meaningful, consistent context. And so then new teachers are more likely to leave the profession because we don't do a great job prepping them and we don't talk about, okay, yeah, some of this stuff might happen. Like some of these things that teachers are talking about on YouTube, they might happen to you. Let's talk about how to deal with them.
Right. Oh, preach. I could not agree more. So many doe-eyed new teachers come in, and by October, they're like, what have I done? And it's because there wasn't that, brainwashing is way too strong of a word, but they're sort of brainwashed into this noble profession where all the kids are going to come and they're going to sit in rows with their arms crossed. And that's not, and I'm not saying every program is like this, and any new teacher can go to any social media site and get the bad story, but yeah, we need to train better. We need to prepare better. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, this has been so fun. I feel like you and I need to go on a road trip, get our Twizzlers and just talk, because I feel hours about this. Listeners, this is Elizabeth Dampf, and what a delight you've been, Elizabeth. Anything else you'd like to, leave our listeners with today?
No, just that I think that we can take that first step towards making teachers the most respected job in the country based on how we talk about it and how we talk to and treat our teachers.
Perfect. Yes, let's do it. Let's get out the magic wand. Oh, Elizabeth, what a delight. Thank you so much for being here. And I can't wait until our listeners get to hear your insights and your wisdom. And keep writing, Elizabeth. Keep writing, because people are reading it and it's making a difference.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.